Welcome to Ohioans Against Extremism podcast.
Oh my God, that was beautiful.
I've been training for that my whole life.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Maria Bruno with Ohioans Against Extremism. This is WTF is going on at the Ohio Statehouse. This is a overview of the state legislation and political atmosphere in Ohio that we try to do quarterly-ish. And so we were co-hosted today with our friends at Red Wine and Blue, specifically Laura. Hello, wave to the crowd. But today I will just provide a brief overview of an update from Ohioans Against Extremism, um, provide a very brief overview of an election update, and then go over some Ohio State House legislation and hopefully leave plenty of time for questions. Okay, quick update from us. I know sometimes our programming is public and sometimes it's private. So often we get the question of what Ohioans Against Extremism does and is doing. So this is an organization that was started last year to respond to extremism in Ohio. We do a lot of advocacy, particularly legislative advocacy, to prevent extremism, and that can come in a lot of different forms. So we try to give a holistic view of what's going on to help Ohioans have the tools to get involved. So what that means is right now we are working on trainings for 2026. We had our How Things Work at the State House presenter training this past year, and we will have some additional options for more training opportunities next year. We continue to do legislative monitoring on our infamous bill tracker, ohiobills.wtf, that is updated weekly. We also tracked and continue to track extremist candidates for office. We do that by flagging red flags. So that means we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, but basically, we are not saying someone is good or bad. We are saying they did this thing that we have a receipt for, and we don't like that thing. And if you don't like that thing, you might want to consider that when going to the polls. So it's not so much an endorsement or an anti-endorsement. It is just a list of flags of people's bad behavior. So we also provide a lot of support to our partners. We have over 45 partners, and we will be having a planning session in December 8th in Columbus in person. So if you are interested in becoming part of our network, Ainsley is actually going to drop a link in the chat here in a moment to set up a conversation, or you can go ahead and complete our community partner interest form on our website. Either way, you'll get to us. And we are working together to build a unified story. So it is not just this constant reactionary thing where we are just reacting to different attacks. There is actual one coordinated message about how we all stand together and are united in this fight. Finally, we do safety planning with our friends. We have a table that is a network of organizations that monitor extremism. That's everything from the chat rooms to their public posts and everything in between. We try to do our best to help Ohioans respond to this so that everyone can stay safe and protected. Stay safe and protected. As I mentioned, we have our community partners program. It's about a little more than 45 organizations. We expect it to continue to grow. We offer centralized advocacy and state safety planning, closed network communication channels, free and discounted training opportunities, partners only workshop, and other collaboration opportunities. It's a good fit for national groups that are looking to keep a pulse on Ohio's action, local groups looking to work more closely on legislative advocacy, and statewide groups looking for a broader reach or greater public awareness about their issue. So if you want to become a partner, I just mentioned, fill out the form or contact Ainsley. We also are having the planning session that I mentioned. So join the network by then so you can be a part of that conversation. Okay, now to the meat. So just a general overview of where we are at. We have partners that are going to talk about each piece of this, but just for your general knowledge, we this year have now officially have new congressional maps that will be more discussed in a moment. We also had local elections, school boards. Rachel and Laura will talk about how that went. And next year, we're going to have statewide elections and congressional elections. So that will lead to different political incentives for different politicians. It will also lead to a decent amount of party power jockeying within the Ohio Republican Party, which can honestly lead to some weird results sometimes. Sometimes there is legislation that is sudden and out of nowhere, and suddenly, or alternatively, there's legislation that is kind of anticipated and expect to get a big push, and usually we're right about those. So I'm going to pass it to Laura to talk a little bit about this year.
All right, so this year was completely surprising and happy, and it was wonderful. So there were sweeping changes in communities and city councils and township trustees. But Red, Wine, and Blue, we focused on school board races. And what I want you to understand is no one can, it's too much data, too much information. No one can cover every single school board across the state. And so I'm going to throw some numbers at you. We have 25 targeted districts. In those targeted districts, there are 295 school boards. 118 of those races were uncontested. That is interesting because three people running, three seats open. We don't know if it's a good board, we don't know if it's a bad board, but those folks are in, like they're on there automatically. So that talks to us about wanting to recruit candidates to run for those seats if there are extremists in those communities. There were also 20 races that didn't have enough candidates at all. And so we're focusing on, in the next couple of steps, looking at what that process is to appoint candidates. And if they are bad boards, you know that they're probably going to appoint another bad person. And so we're looking at where those are in those, and that's just the 20 in the 25 districts that we cover. So we know that there are more across the state. But I want to talk about the good stuff. And Rachel, please pop in. Like, we had amazing wins and amazing good stuff happen in Riverside and Mentor and Kenston and Brecksville, Broadview Heights, North Royalton, Berea, Medina, Hudson, Revere. Forest Hills was amazing. Oak Hills, Miamisburg, Olentangy, Dublin, Gahanna. We did really, really well in Northeast Ohio and in Central Ohio. Southwest Ohio had some hot spots and some really good spots. So the bad was Lakota. They elected an extremist candidates. Highland, um, which is in Medina County, they had their because of an unfilled vacancy, they elected four new members to their school board. And so just due to instability, we're going to be kind of watching them. And then Wadsworth added a member of the Republican Party who has said some interesting things, which I will be sharing with Rachel later. And then the ugly Xenia, Lebanon, Little Miami, broke my heart. So, Rachel, it's just all over the place. Masons flipped their entire community. Forest Hills did the same thing. It's been really refreshing, and folks are full of hope and feeling really excited about what's going on in their school districts.
Yeah, also Maria, if you want to go to the next slide, we were tracking, like Laura said, there's no way to track every one of these candidates. There's over 600 districts in the state, and we are mostly relying on tips because we clearly saw this cycle more than last cycle for sure. Candidates were either told or realized they needed to scrub their social media presences. So we were seeing them delete old posts and old quotes and trying to make the things they said that would have been labeled red flags disappear from the internet. So a lot of what we did was rely on folks like you, folks in the communities to alert us of things. And then we would do research once we got those tips to see if the person qualified for our red flag list. But in the end, 74% of the competitive candidates that we were tracking lost their races, which is wild. So there's more than 70, there's more candidates on the list, some of whom were unfortunately running in districts where they were absolutely going to win because no one ran against them, which is a problem that we should address in the future. But of the competitive districts, which was, I believe, close to 60 of them, there were 74% of those folks lost their races. And some of them have been going back in and writing down the margins, and some of them won or lost by literally a couple dozen votes. It really is very, very possible that this tracker made an impact. It is also very possible that if we do this like earlier in the future, we can get to more districts, more candidates, and have some of those very, very tight margins happen in more places. Also, it's just a good reminder that your vote really matters because several of these candidates lost by not very many votes. So it was very, very exciting. But yeah, like Laura mentioned, there were some sad ones. Xenia was sad for me too. There were some really, really gross things that those candidates said, and they're now going to be school board members. But the good thing is, because there are fewer of these folks and we know who they are, we can watch them over the next couple of years. We can fight back harder against them. We can focus our energy on them because there are fewer of folks we would label as red flag candidates. So it really does set us up better for even next cycle.
And in at the beginning of the year in January, we're going to be doing some programming about how to pay attention to these school board candidates and how to watch the meetings online or show up in person and what sort of language you need to be paying attention to. So it's we're just as successful with our candidates as well, and we squished some extremism up all over the state. So we're excited about it.
Amazing. Hopefully it made your members feel their power.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Next year,
Take it away, Laura.
dude, it wasn't even like Wednesday afternoon, and I had people saying, "Do you want to come to the roundtable for candidate recruitment for 26?" And I was like, "Can I just sleep a little bit, just a smidge?" So we have statewide and Congress coming into play in 2026, and so right now, there's a whole coalition of folks who are actively recruiting candidates for county races and statewide races. We'll have primaries in the spring, and they're courting primary voters. And so there are lots of different events happening across the state. Um, all those levies that didn't pass in this last cycle, they're going to be coming up in May because those schools still need that funding. And so we're going to be watching the legislature with any of these property tax rules that are coming into play. And we're going to be doing some education through Red, Wine, and Blue in April about the changes to how levies can be moved through. And then also we're going to be doing some civic education. We've done it in the summer in the past, but we're going to be hitting folks earlier so that way they understand how this all works. If there's no primary challenger, we're gonna be focused on the general election, and then they're going to be courting undecided voters.
Yeah, so and also just a note about that, that leads to some funny like matchups because there will be some districts where they are courting those primary voters, they're trying to run to the right or the left. There are going to be other districts that they are already just trying to get to November, and so they are going to moderate themselves and not do
Right.
anything really
Like
ridiculous.
we know for sure that like Captor is going to be going against either Macaulay or Marin. And so we know that there's going to be a Republican primary up by the lake. So we know that's going to be happening. And so Macaulay and Marin are probably trying to figure themselves out.
Or
Um,
Williams, right? Isn't he in that one
oh, and
too?
Williams, oh, I'm sorry, there's three, and Williams is in there too. So that's going to be one to watch. It should be very entertaining.
And Williams has sponsored roughly 1,000 legislation pieces of legislation this cycle just so he can talk about them. So, like, that's a fun little detail. Okay.
Fantastic.
So Laura, I'm going to pass to you to talk a little bit more specifically about some of the districts that we really expect a lot of action in.
Sure, sure. I just kind of mentioned it. Captor, I'll add Williams in there as well. But when they redrew the maps, and Catherine is going to be talking about this later, Landsman's area, Ohio 1, became a little tougher. Max Miller in Ohio 7, he's mine. He's got some policy issues and some personal issues going on. And then, as I said, Captor, she's going to be primary. There's a primary with Macaulay and Marin and Williams. Mike Turner in 10 has policy issues. He's on the oversight committee and he's not doing very much oversight. Both Turner and Kerry have not voted for release of the Epstein files, and so that's on people's minds. And then Sykes, she has an easier race, and I thought it was very, very interesting that her opponent, like the day after the maps were voted on, was like, "Peace, I'm out." Like he was like, he decided not to run. So we're paying attention to these races. And Turner and Kerry were chosen because they became, as they, oh, you know what? I'm going to let Catherine talk about it later. Never mind.
Great. When in doubt, I always leave it to Catherine to explain people the wonky things that happen in our elections. Okay, so now we're going to move to the State House drama. And just as a note before we dive into specific legislation, 'tis the season for introducing legislation for political messaging purposes. We just talked about the incentives that people have to brand themselves in certain ways. That means that you're going to see different types of bills, but specifically bills that they can message around, so the things that they want to brand their campaign, expect that to be their pet issue. Also, wedge bills. Bills that divides the other side is another thing that you're going to see a lot of. You'll see that at both the state and federal level. So now I will pass it to none other than Catherine to talk about some of the redistricting drama.
Hi, everybody. As you might imagine, we are all recuperating from what happened at the State House. One of the things that I'm very aware of, and Maria, I can't actually start my video. It says that you've disabled it.
I'll figure that out. Keep talking.
And it was one of those things I wouldn't have bothered you, but since we're recording, anyway, meanwhile, back at the ranch, for many of us, we were following the map making very closely. And we just kept thinking, okay, so they got through that first stage, that September stage, and really nothing really happened. But okay, we can kind of get that, hey, there's not going to be this bipartisan map making. But then when we got to the Ohio Redistricting Commission taking over the mapping, it was fairly astonishing how they essentially negotiated completely in secret. That there wasn't really even an opportunity to hear about why they thought the districts were good. One of the things that happened, State Rep Brian Stewart got up and he's introducing this map, and it's a PDF. Meaning, as opposed to giving to us electronically, like on Dave's redistricting app, it's literally you're looking at it on a piece of paper, so you can't get a sense of what it is. And as opposed to saying, hey, check out Congressional District 15, we've changed it this way or that way, as opposed to doing the kind of detail that you would normally do when you testify, he basically read the Ohio Constitution. And so I guess what I'm saying to you is that the maps were created, debated, negotiated completely in secret, which is not just a violation of the Ohio Constitution, it's also a violation of Sunshine Law or Open Meetings Law. At the end of the day, the likely partisan breakout is 12-3. I think there's some wiggle room in there. We could imagine that incumbents, such as Marcy Kaptur, with name recognition, may be able to overcome, what is a more Republican gerrymander. It's also possible down in, the first congressional district, which is much more Republican, that Greg Landsman could do the same. There was a lot of debate over whether this was the best deal that they could get. I firmly believe that deals are certainly better when negotiated in public. That in fact, it's not just the law, it's really good practice to actually include the public. Now, we had a lot of fun, I was going to say, running around the State House wearing "Where's the Map" t-shirts and handing out, bags of candy that say "Don't be a trickster." Create fair maps, show us the maps. I mean, I was going to say Nick Bates was there. One of the things that I think is important is that people really care about this and are really committed. And I just wanted to say thank you to Equal Districts and to We Are Ohio, and of course my Fair Districts partners, and all of you that I always look at this as we knew that it was going to be really hard to get a good map going into this and to have fair districts going into this. And I was just so pleased that so many people showed up and pushed back. And I highly encourage you all to check out that map. And when I say that, not just the one that's a simple PDF, but spend a little bit of time looking at it as we're thinking about, candidates, as we're thinking about how it is that this map will play out. I think one of the things that is really interesting is that Kevin Coughlin decided not to continue his race against Amelia Sykes. Now, Amelia Sykes is Democrat 13th Congressional District. Her district is 3 points more Democratic, and Kevin Coughlin, the Republican, dropped out. It just highlights how much these district lines make a difference and how hard it is to actually overcome this kind of bias. Mia or Rachel, anything you want to add?
Nope, I think you got it.
Yeah.
Frustrating time.
And Spencer asked a question I do not know the answer to, but I will get back to you.
It doesn't matter.
I
Thank you, though.
I
Is
was
this what Mia knows?
No, I was just I was just chatting with someone about, the impact of the new lines. So, we're close to the time when people, have to declare for the primary. And so obviously people have been considering running or thinking about running or doing some campaigning. And I'm not going to get the name right now, but there's somebody in, southeastern Ohio who's basically been campaigning for the past bunch of months only to find that the area that he's was hoping would be the new district that he would run in has been divided between 4 different congressional districts. So, clearly that person now is not going to run. So some of the impact of these new lines you won't actually see because it's just in people who were going to run who now are not going to run. So for an area like Athens, which has switched back and forth which congressional district it's in every time they draw a new line, that makes it very, very hard for them to have candidates that are willing to step up, et cetera.
Spencer, I see your hands up.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw out, there's been a lot of conversation about the districts and where we are and obviously how we got here. As we're going forward, I think perception is definitely everything. I Obviously, these are not good maps, and these were never going to be good maps. But Sher did win 10 of the seats in 2018, the last time he was, on the ballot with the Trump midterm. And so I think for our sake of obviously internal conversations are different, but as we go forward externally, trying to get as many good candidates to think that 2026 is going to be a blue wave year and have really good candidate recruitment like we did in 2018, and messaging that these maps are, while terrible gerrymanders, actually might overplay the Republican hand and open up a few additional pickup opportunities, I think is going to be really important to convincing people to run. So just throwing that out there, I like that we're talking about Kerry and these other targets, because I think that's kind of where we need to shift the narrative.
Well, and it is interesting how much is about how we approach things. And this even goes back to Kevin Coughlin deciding to drop out after, 3 points, a 3-point difference. And so I think there's something to be said about revving up our fighting spirit and our commitment to the voters to ensure that they have as much information as possible. And I do think, this is just part of the tale, but it highlights once again that not this year, not next year, probably not the year after that, but we do actually need to create an independent citizens redistricting commission. And certainly as we watch what's happening, the gerrymandering redistricting wars of 2025, yeah, we have to be getting prepared to do another citizen initiative in a few years. And with that, anything else you wanted to add, Maria?
Nope.
So
Carry
I did want to highlight these kind of things that are happening with voting. So there's this bill that was introduced October 14th, Senate Bill 293, that was passed out of the Senate last Wednesday. So it just went lickety split. And what it does actually has a very significant impact. It means that, right now we have this 4-day window. It used to be 10, if people remember that. This 4-day window after the election when ballots are received. So these are the vote by mail or absentee ballots. When they are received, they're postmarked so that we know they're before the election. Right now, the 4 days after the election, they become part of the official count. They're not just eliminated, set aside, thrown out, they become part of the official count. And these are thousands of voters. I mean, I think it's important to realize that this has a big it has a significant impact and could have significant impacts on close elections. And this bill is now heading over to the Ohio House. I think one of the things that is really challenging is these kind of, 4 days, 0 days, how big a change could that be? This is both a small change in a very short bill and a significant change. And so I highly encourage you, to take some action, talk to your friends about it. If you're at the State House, this is something really to watch, with 293. Now, many of you have heard us talking about 153 for a long time. We are now on version 8 of that bill. A substitute bill was accepted. There is not a hearing this week, but the thing that's important is there are so many little changes that will make work for the boards of elections more complicated. And there are changes in it that do things like make provisional vote forms more complicated. But it's important to remember that at the end of the day, we're talking about the elimination of drop boxes. We're talking about, like, okay, so they're going to eliminate that window. The mail's not getting any faster. They're going to eliminate the window with 293, and with 153, what they want to do is eliminate drop boxes at the boards of elections, not increase them, which would make logical sense. There are a variety of things to think about. This is the documentary proof of citizenship bill. Now, there have been a lot of changes, and so, folks are still going through just kind of the details to get a sense of what it is. I encourage you to follow this one. It's not in the agenda this week. It could be next week, because once again, version number 8. One of the things that I think is important is, anyone who follows voting things, whenever you make these kind of drastic changes, it takes a couple years to get accustomed to them. And we're still getting accustomed to the rules of 458. And so, as we think about the kind of election administration from the poll workers, election officials, it's a problem. But it also makes it much harder to register to vote, to cast a ballot, and to deal with provisional ballots. And so, as we think about that bill, it's worth taking some time to spend some time pushing back on Senate Bill 153. I did include an action, which, Mia, if you're willing to pop it into the chat. And then anything that you want to say, Rachel, about this, either of the bills, anything that I didn't mention.
No, the only thing I'll say, honestly, SB 153, in my opinion, is currently the most dangerous bill moving through the State House. And that is saying something, because there is a lot happening right now. But this bill it would prevent what is potentially hundreds of thousands of people from voting a normal ballot. It could cancel tens of thousands of registrations if people don't cure their ballot on time. It bans things that were their own issue last year that we're not even talking about, like banning of drop boxes. It is truly, if you are going to focus on one issue, if you're feeling overwhelmed and you need to pick one bill, SB 153 is the one I'd pick.
And then if you want to participate, like, we have a study committee looking at this bill. If you're like, sign me up. I would love to participate in exploring this massive bill because of all the changes. We would be really happy if you were able to do that. I will throw my email into the chat, so you just let me know.
And just to say, the reason for the study committee is, as Catherine mentioned, they just keep putting in sub bills, and the bill just keeps getting longer and longer, and just more and more weird shit keeps getting thrown in. And Kelly, who's on this call, has been going through it with a fine-tooth comb, and folks at ACLU are going through it, and elections officials are going through it. But of course, they brought up both of these bills during when elections officials are working on an election, as they did earlier this year, to deprive them of the opportunity of weighing in. So, that's, yeah. And the 153 also has stuff about direct democracy in it, of course.
There was one improvement, which has to do with the way that the bill initially read is even if you received a t-shirt or a clipboard or, I don't know, a slice of pizza, and you were out collecting signatures, you were considered paid. So the bill has been changed. So it isn't all of that. It's just monetary if you have received money that you have to wear a badge. And the badge, you might say, well, the badges aren't such a terrible thing. They're not. The challenge is if you're having to if you're having to ensure that absolutely everybody has their badge and that people can see their badge and all of those kinds of things. And what if they're tracking folks and really want to go after us? The way that the legislation is written would make it much easier to go after circulators. And if you want to do direct democracy, you want to collect signatures, you want people to feel secure, to understand the rules, and not to be worried that there will be politically motivated attacks. And right now, we're still worried. So even though there was an improvement, it's not as big as you might imagine. And then, are we ready for Constitutional Convention? Okay, so I did want to highlight that Ohio still is on pace. There's a real focus on collecting Ohio as a convention of state. At this point, we've had a variety of hearings. The most recent one was on October 28th. Initially, the hearing was supposed to include proponents and opponents, but the third hearing, only proponent testimony was permitted, and the Convention of States folks brought a lot of folks to that hearing. So this continues to be an area where there is interest, and it's important to remember that you had everybody from Ron DeSantis to Rick Santorum visiting Ohio and pushing for an Article 5 convention. So I encourage you to check out defendourconstitution.org to learn more about an Article 5 convention. I think the thing that's the most important to keep in mind is there really are no rules when it comes to an Article 5 convention. And so as we think about the kinds of changes they might want to make when they're talking about limiting the power and jurisdiction, I think it's important to keep in mind the kinds of changes that they could make, that have to do with the environment, that have to do with even the election of U.S. senators directly is one of the things that could be considered. So it's very important to participate in this. When a hearing comes up, we will make sure to let you all know, because this is the weird kind of inside baseball that gets moving and is really problematic. And sometimes people feel uncomfortable testifying about the US Constitution. But if all you say is there are no rules, and in 1787, when they did the initial constitutional convention that created our convention, they were told not to create a new constitution. That's just what they did. And so, like, if they have no rules and there's nothing to stop them, and the appointment process could be just crazy, we just can't know who would actually be making incredibly important decisions about all of the parameters for our government. And with that, I will hand it back.
All right, thank you. Actually, before we move on, are there any questions about anything that was just said or additional comments from other folks on the call? Okay, great. We will keep it moving. There will be more time at the end too. I am now going to pass it to Danielle. I'm now realizing I don't actually know how to pronounce your last name. Firish, I think. Danielle from Planned Parenthood Advocates of Ohio to tell us a little bit about what's going on in healthcare.
Oh my God, Maria, how dare you?
I'm so sorry.
Fear sick, first of all. Wow, you think you have friends in this space. Just kidding. Love you, Maria. So let's touch on all of the stuff that the legislature is up to, particularly post issue 1. And when I say that, I mean the Reproductive Freedom Amendment. We are seeing more bills introduced now since abortion and reproductive health care access was codified in the Ohio Constitution. And that is notable because they simply refuse to accept that there exists a Reproductive Freedom Amendment and keep trying to find ways that they can work around it or kind of test the fences of those protections. So let's start with HB 324. We, as a coalition, have been talking about this one because while the proponents and the sponsors of the bill made very clear that this is targeting access to mifepristone, they also mentioned things like SSRIs and or any other drug that they say has severe adverse impacts in more than 5% of folks who use that medication. The problem is that they are allowing cherry-picked data to determine whether or not a drug actually causes 5% plus impacts. For mifepristone, they used a single study that was self-published, non-peer-reviewed, and goes against decades of evidence about the safety and efficacy of mifepristone. And they could easily do the exact same with drugs like SSRIs. We know that they're kind of getting their marching orders from the Looney Tunes at the top of the administration, like RFK Jr., who's heading up HHS. So we're going to likely see continued attacks on things like access to mifepristone and SSRIs and other forms of medication. So this is notable because it's not strictly just a repro bill and could actually impact a lot of folks. And like I've said before, I mean, good luck to them if they take everybody's SSRIs away from them. It's going to be an ugly, ugly day in the state of Ohio were that to happen. That bill actually got a surprise 4th hearing added this week. So it has a hearing on Wednesday morning. And there is apparently a sub-bill coming. Nobody knows what it is. We've talked to the staffers and the caucus members, and they don't know what the sub-bill is. But if and when I get that information, I will tell you because it may heavily impact this bill, especially if they change some of the language around what kind of data or studies can be used to restrict access to certain medications. HB 410 got, it's had all 3 hearings now. It had its opponent hearing last week that I testified in. This is also a bill that to actually function as they want it to, it would have to be amended as written right now. So right now, it is basically an expansion of the federal budget bill that stripped us from Medicaid access for all abortion providers having Medicaid access. Of course, this is like most heavily going against Planned Parenthood. Surprise, surprise. So the federal bill has a deadline of July 2026. It's a 1-year stripping of funding from Medicaid. The sponsors of this bill said that they intend to make this a permanent state level Medicaid defund for abortion providers. And again, federal dollars and state dollars already do not go to abortion services. The Hyde Amendment has existed for a long time. Our legislature has defunded us as far as they possibly can at this point. And this would actually make it so that Medicaid could not be used for any reproductive health care services if you also provide abortion care. So obviously, we're a massive provider of a huge spectrum of services that no one would be able to access if they are covered by Medicaid. Chair Gross is Representative Gross is the chair for this committee. So, you know, pour one out for all of us fighting this bill because she's thrilled to see this in her committee. So this could receive a vote out of committee at any time, but they did not schedule the Medicaid committee for this week. So that's some good news. And then we want to get into, so there are a couple ways that these are kind of like outright attacks on abortion that are very, very obvious on their face. And there's quite a few ways that they're attacking sex ed, abortion access, reproductive health care in kind of like sneakier ways. They're not sneaky to me, but they might be sneaky if you were to look at, say, like the title of the bill. So we have a couple bills moving, especially in education spaces, that would also impact abortion providers. There are these following 3 on the list are all in that area. So banning mental health services to minors without parental consent. Again, right now, I believe that students have access to 6 sessions without a parent being notified. This obviously we know is targeting LGBTQ plus kids, but also could be targeting kids who are survivors of abuse who have abusive households who also may have had abortion services as a minor. So we have been really watching this bill and trying to see what the impact could possibly be there. As of now, you can have a judge override a parent's consent for a minor to access abortion services. So obviously, if that were to happen, we wouldn't want that parent to be able to be notified of that. And then the success sequence curriculum, we all know Ohio is the only state in the country that has absolutely no education standards, health education standards, because we just roll like that. We just make shit up as we go. So we right now already have no standards, and now we have these two bills, well, three bills: success sequence and baby Olivia. So the success sequence curriculum is literally an expansion on abstinence only education that already exists in the state of Ohio. So if you thought our sex education couldn't get worse, LOL, here we are. This success sequence literally lays out the fact that for you to be a successful contributor to society, you have to follow these exact steps. And that includes sex only after marriage and sex only after a heterosexual marriage as well. So this, while it doesn't look like it really involves sex ed on its face, it really does, because it is abstinence only education, is being pushed by abstinence only education organizations. Lastly, we have baby Olivia. So baby Olivia, these bills started being introduced in 2023 in a ton of other states, and have been passed in other legislatures. But it's had a lot of problems with implementation because the way our bill is written is really interesting. So we have an all testimony hearing on Thursday morning. Notably, they let the proponents have their own hearing. Us oppos do not get our own hearing. So we will be there Thursday morning testifying against this bill. But it's unique for a couple reasons, because Ohio is actually the only state that in the bill mandates that you can only use the baby Olivia bill or the baby Olivia video in classrooms to show human development or human embryo development. Other states have used it as an option or have really pushed that as the option, but we're the only state that says it can only be the baby Olivia bill or the baby Olivia video. It is produced by Live Nation. They're like a massively partisan anti-abortion organization. It's also really inaccurate. And the way the bill's written right now, the baby Olivia bill doesn't even satisfy the standards of the bill itself. So the bill itself says that you have to show ultrasound video that is more than 3 minutes in length, blah, blah, blah. The baby Olivia video is AI generated. It is not an ultrasound video at all. So it doesn't even satisfy the requirements of the bill as written, which is interesting. And it also declares fetal personhood about 5 seconds into the bill. It says, at the moment of conception, this is when life begins. So this is also a sneaky fetal personhood related bill. We have several others that involve fetal personhood that are on the books right now that have not moved in the state house. The one good thing about this bill, so it does look like they are going to be introducing an amendment on Thursday as well. I am hoping that they are amending it in the way we pushed the sponsor to amend it, because she previously agreed that she'd be willing to make some very important changes. One of which is that there is not a parental opt-out in this bill right now. She said that she would be amenable to adding a parental opt-out. She also said she'd be amenable to allowing other curriculum, videos, etc., to be utilized in lieu of the baby Olivia video, and that could be determined by the Department of Education statewide rather than legislators. So I'm hoping that's the amendment, but you guys, who knows? I don't know what this committee is up to. Also, Representative Click is in this committee, and he's like the king of fetal personhood. So I'm sure that he's trying to push this to stay as intact as it possibly could be. I think there's so many things happening. I feel like I blacked out during this. If there's anything that I missed, please let me know, or if people have questions. But these are not even half of the anti-repro bills that have been introduced so far in this legislature. So this is going to be a continuing theme, per usual. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you. Oof. Feeling really kind of beat down. So let's keep it going.
I'm not going to help with that.
I know you're not. I know you're not. But I'm going to pass it to Rachel to go over education stuff.
Yes. Okay. So we are seeing some trends as we head toward the legislative break. We are hearing that they are going to break right before Thanksgiving and leave us alone until potentially February, but at least January of next year. So the next couple weeks are going to be wild. And then theoretically, it's going to be a pause. One of the themes is definitely is education bills, specifically, like Danielle mentioned, curriculum related bills. So I've not included the ones she talked about. We have so many more to talk about. HB 326 is really flying under the radar, and I actually think it's one of the worst education bills in the state. So this bill it would require Ohio high schools to give this standardized test called the Classic Learning Test to students, and they could also give the SAT and ACT if they want to, but a lot of schools are going to think, we don't have time, we don't have the physical space to do another test, so a lot of school districts will actually end up likely dropping the SAT or ACT, and students who want to take that test would have to take it on their own. So that alone is very troubling. Another piece that is very troubling is who wrote the Classic Learning Test, which is PragerU and Christopher Rufo, the CRT guy. So like some of the farthest right voices in education wrote this standardized test. And it is very troubling that teachers would have to teach to this test, but also that students trying to leave Ohio to go to a college that maybe requires the SAT would have to either spend their own money and their own time to take it on their own, or they wouldn't be able to go to those schools out of state. So it really it's a very troubling bill, and it's just getting absolutely no attention because of everything else that's happening. So that has a third hearing this week, and there is potentially amendments and things like that. So that is in our Ohio bills.wtf if you want to take actions there. There is House Bill 486. This one has definitely been getting more attention. So you'll notice I did not mention the name of the bill, but I will tell you the name of the bill, which is the Charlie Kirk American Heritage Act. So this bill would allow public school teachers and public college professors, college teachers, educators to highlight the influence of Christianity on history and culture. And a large percentage of the bill, like most of the pages of the bill, are actually examples of ways that teachers could highlight the positive impacts of Christianity in their various lesson planning. And the bill is it's funny. It says religion like twice, and then the rest of the time it says Christianity all the way through. So it clearly is that specific one religion focused. And one of the ways that we have been urging folks to oppose this bill is to threaten malicious compliance, where you say, if you want me to teach about the impact of Christianity, I will teach about the 200 years that it was used to justify slavery in America, that kind of thing, to get the legislators thinking about potentially things they weren't thinking about when they wrote this very reactionary bill in the wake of Charlie Kirk's death. So that is moving this week as well. It's actually probably going to pass committee this week, potentially then pass the whole House this week. So there's some actions in our tracker as well on that one.
Rachel, I put it in the chat, but I'm going to just say it out loud since you're talking. Can you explain why this is harmful, even though teachers are like already allowed to teach about Christianity? Like if someone is saying right now, like, of course they should be allowed to teach about Christianity historically, like what would you say to that person?
Yeah, so that's actually a great argument to make against the bill, is that if this bill is actually just you may teach about the impact of religion on history and culture, that is already in Ohio law. The social studies standards that we already have right now allow and actually require teaching about how religion has influenced, the founders of the country and that kind of thing. So the only way that this bill is not entirely redundant is if it actually does what we think it does, which is force people to discuss Christianity specifically and the positives of Christianity specifically. So that is an argument you could make, is that we don't need this bill, because if you want people to teach about the impact of religion on history, that's already happening. If you want to teach about the impact of Christianity on history, that's probably illegal. And so that is actually a really good argument to make to get people to admit what the bill's goals are. Let's see. A big long thing in the chat. Oh, thank you, Jonah. So a couple other bills to know about. One is HB 531. So this has been around for a couple GAs now. It would allow volunteer chaplains in schools. This bill is still very, very problematic, although it's funny, they clearly tried to address some of the problems with it from last cycle. So for example, this bill actually includes a background check requirement. Really basic stuff, but they did include it. There's still obviously a ton of things wrong with this bill, though. One of the main ones is what would these chaplains be allowed to discuss? And would they be qualified to discuss those things? What if they're talking to a student who is having like suicidal thoughts and ideations? Like, would this chaplain be qualified in the mental health field to actually give safe advice? What if a student is having, questions about their sexuality? Is the chaplain going to be encouraging them to go to conversion therapy? Like, could they discuss is one of the big questions. And would they be qualified to do so? So this bill is definitely tighter than previous versions, but it is still a ton of pieces wrong with it. And just obviously another encroachment of religion on public schools.
One thing too to add, keep this in mind that this is coupled with that pre-clearance bill for mental health care. So right now, a student who may be struggling with their mental health would have access to a counselor right away, whereas if this bill passed and the bill banning mental health care passed, the chaplain might be their only person they're allowed to go to.
Nope.
So it's not even just that like they could be an option, they might be the only option, which is kind of a scary place to live.
Yep, absolutely. And Danielle put in the chat and is absolutely correct. These chaplains would not be qualified. They are not mental health professionals. The law does not require them to be so. So you would be having very, very intense, important discussions with vulnerable youth, with adults who are not qualified to discuss those things. So yeah, not good. And then the SB 113, HB 155 it's funny. They're trying to move it. They definitely are. It hasn't moved in a couple weeks. This is the one that would ban all diversity, equity, inclusion in public schools with no definitions of any of those terms. There has been a lot of public pushback. Honesty for Ohio Education released a toolkit to help folks fight back against this bill. We've been having discussions with the legislators. I really do think they're still going to move it, but they might be trying to like hold off until we move on. So we cannot let this drop. We have to keep pushing this issue to keep the pressure on. Because at the moment, it's paused, but I don't think forever. And then a couple other, yes, we are going over. I'm sorry. So there's just 3 more that you should know that are have not moved in a little bit, but we're watching them. There, that's all I got for this slide. So we can move fast.
It's okay. I think if it goes a few minutes over, that's okay. You can always email us follow-up questions if you have to jump off before we get through it. But I think this is really good information. So go ahead.
Yes, so there are dozens of property tax bills moving through the State House right now. They're all very scary in their own separate ways, but there's 3 that you really, really should know about. These are the 3 that are most damaging and the most likely to pass. So all 3 of them are moving at the exact same time, at the exact same pace. They have all now passed the Ohio House. They are all now in the exact same Senate committee, which is Sandra O'Brien's committee. It is very scary because they all overlap with each other and would likely not work with each other. So that's going to have to be addressed. But it does create the ability for us to have very clear calls to action on them. So telling your state senator that all 3 are bad, and then telling the committee chair that has all 3 bills that all 3 are bad. So that does help us in that way. Because we are short on time, I will not go too deep into them, but just one quick highlight on each of them. HB 335 is the bill you may have read about that Republican local officials actually stopped it earlier this year because they called it the worst defunding of the police in state history, which is hilarious, and stopped the legislators from moving it forward for a while. So this bill so I just put a document in the chat there to give you more information, but basically it would create a cap on the money that's like the safety valve money that school districts get and local governments get when they are not able to pass levies and bring in local revenue that way. So it creates a cap on those inside mills that are literally like their safety valve, safety net. And it originally made such a strict cap on that funds that the local officials were like, we are doomed. This will cause police and fire departments to like go away. So they have, thanks to partners like OEA and OFT, they've been negotiating behind the scenes and they've made this bill slightly less horrifying. But we don't know how much less horrifying because there's no calculations. And that's part of the problem is these bills are moving so fast, nobody actually knows how bad they will be for local districts, which is not how I would recommend legislating. And then there is HB 129. So this one is also harmful to school districts that are in the most trouble. So school districts that like rural areas, areas where they haven't passed levies in a very long time. There is it's called the 20 mil floor. It allows these districts to exist, to continue to exist with at least 20 mils of I could go into it, but this would make it so more districts are removed from that very bottom existence floor, making it harder for them to continue to operate. So that sucks. And then HB 186, this one would also there it's all very problematic. So this one actually is a problem because they added a substitute bill that does something I've never heard of before that makes absolutely no sense. They added a retroactive tax credit. They added a tax credit in the past and applied it to the future, which makes no sense for the districts that have already, they've already got contracts, they've already made purchases, they've already spent the money because it was there last year, and now you're telling them it's not actually there because you created a tax credit in the past. So it creates this massive, massive hole, like 50 or hundreds of millions of dollars. And the legislators are, again, shout out to our partners like OEA and OFT. They've been helping to navigate this one and try to find ways to fill that hole that this bill would create. But we're going to have to, it's just passed into the Senate and they're going to need to find at least 50 million more dollars to pass this bill. So we'll see. It's all bad. Yeah, that's all. Next slide. Okay, so these two bills have not moved in a while, and I still expect them to move, but clearly immigration has kind of fallen to the wayside because they can now message about it, but they don't have to pass the bills right away while they deal with things like property taxes. So both of these bills are still there. I just don't have updates for you on them because thankfully, they have not moved in a while, but we still are, they very likely will. Okay. Oh, I didn't update. That's too bad. Okay, so this SB
Start talking and I'll update the slide.
Sweet. So SB 56 is the bill that is radically altering the adult use marijuana law that everybody passed at the ballot last year. I think it was last year. And it has now gotten to a very entertaining place where the House and Senate do not agree with each other's changes on the bill. So both the House and Senate have passed their own version. They refuse to accept each other's versions. They are now going to a conference committee. So that's the same thing that happened with the budget. That's 4 Republicans and 2 Democrats, 3 from the House, 3 from the Senate. They all get together in a room and they essentially fight it out. They fight out their differences between their 2 different versions of the bill. They can do whatever they want. They can add whatever they want. They can remove whatever they want. They can write the bill all over if they want to. And then whatever they come up with is the final version of the bill. And then the House and Senate will each vote on it, but they can only vote yes or no. They can't make changes. So it's going to be very interesting how this goes. If this is an issue you're passionate about, these 6 people are the ones to contact right now because there will not be testimony opportunities. So you're going to need to be calling and emailing and tweeting and that kind of thing.
And related to this, Governor DeWine did have that executive order related to hemp products, which they had a bunch of confusing court things. The headline of that is that executive order is in place, or injunction is in place until December 2nd, I think. Ainsley, correct me if I'm wrong. She was looking it up and I read it, and now that I'm saying it out loud, I don't know if I'm saying it right. So
Yes.
Thank you.
They extended the injunction to December 2nd, correct?
Thanks.
All right. And then my last slide is a reminder that there's a ton of bills we didn't talk about today. So go check out ohiobills.wtf for it's updated as of literally like last night at 2 a.m. and lots of actions, lots of testimonies that are needed. One example of a key bill we didn't put in any other slide today is at HB 372, which is again not getting any attention, that would create mandatory life or death sentences for killing certain people, and no option to consider individual circumstances. So just go in that document, spend some time. I couldn't sleep, Catherine. I was very angry at the Democrats. And the go in there and like see if there's testimony needed on a bill you maybe haven't thought through. Take the fact that the legislature is out tomorrow on Tuesday for Veterans Day, and which gives us some extra time to do testimonies for Wednesday and Thursday and get some of that out there.
And reminder as well that we have our weekly update email. So if you're not on our email list, get on it. But we try to flag all of the relevant committees and stuff each week. Are there any questions, or are there other bills that folks on this call have flagged as important that we didn't get the opportunity to discuss? Okay, we've got 3 bills flagged by our resident labor friend, John Esterly here. 510, 512, and 513. Do you want to say anything about any of them? And are those all HBs?
Those are all HBs, Maria. Broad strokes, I don't think they're going anywhere, but we treat everything like a credible threat. 510 is right to work. 512 would eliminate PLAs, and 513 would dramatically restrict prevailing wage. So these are all 3 direct attacks at organized labor, and then 512 and 513 specifically towards building trades. All 3 have been assigned to Commerce and Labor. Mark Johnson's the chair there. He has not taken up any of them, even for sponsor testimony yet.
In the realm of bills that are bad, but we are not totally freaking out about yet, is also the drag ban is back. The reason we're not freaking out is because it had 1 hearing, but then seemed to whatever. But that is also still on the list of bills.
And there was a rumor that it was going to have a hearing this week. And weirdly, the hearing notice came out and it's not on there. But we are still watching very closely. They may do an updated hearing today to announce, that bill is now on the agenda. So we're watching closely for that one. And Spencer has his hand up.
Hey, just 2 things on the environment front that come top of mind. First off is HB 303. This is community energy legislation, so it'll allow communities to basically have shared solar services and things like that. It's really great for increasing production and decreasing costs and lowering costs specifically for small communities. The utilities oppose it. So that's HB 303 going through the Ohio House that we're supporting. We're working on our Dem members of the Energy Committee there. So if you have Dem members of the Energy Committee, tell them to support House Bill 303. Good for energy generation. On the less good side, SB 294 is moving pretty rapidly in the Senate. This is a energy siting definition bill, effectively, that would have some ridiculous definitions around what is reliable and what is cost effective and affordable and things like that in the renewable energy space. It basically makes it so that solar is not a renewable energy source because the sun goes down, and it makes it so that gas is a renewable and reliable energy source, which it is by definition not. So we are working on organizing opposition to that as well. So those are my 2 hits. Thank you.
Thank you. Look at that. A few more good ones at the end. Or good bill overview, not all good bills. Well, Laura,
thank everyone for coming. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I was going to say thank you to Red, Wine, and Blue for hosting it, co-hosting this with us as well.
You guys do all the good work. It just is so much to keep track of. I don't even know how. 2 a.m., Rachel. Go get some sleep, baby.
I had a lot of rage coursing through me, and I decided to use it for good.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. That's all we've got. We appreciate you joining us, and we appreciate you.
Have a good afternoon, friends. Bye.
Well, thank you for listening to Ohioans Against Extremism podcast. If you want more, you can check us out at ohagainstextremism.org. Follow us on Twitter, No Extremism Ohio. And stay tuned, subscribe, and feel free to donate if your pockets allow it.